Live from the KC Property Guys and KC Pier studio in beautiful Kansas City. Home to over 200 fountains and more barbecue restaurants per capita than anywhere in the nation. It's the Kansas City Real Estate Industry Leaders Show, a show about industry leaders from the local Kansas City metro market for Kansas City real estate related professionals and enthusiasts like you. And now, here's your host, Eric Scheele.
Hi, everyone. We are collected again, kind of in a post-COVID release, but we are back in the studio for the Kansas City Real Estate Industry Leaders podcast, and we've had a few changes. Today, we're going to be talking with Brian Dufour, structural consultant and director of operations with KC Pier, and we also have our new marketing director, John Lindquist, with us today. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, John.
Good to be here.
Today we're going to spend some time talking about, it's really timely because we're going to be talking about settling. And we're entering, of course I say this, and what are we, July 30th, 31st?
31st, yeah.
Just last night they had 10 inches of rain down in Clinton, Missouri, and we're starting to talk about the dry season. Something's ironic about that. But we really are. We are in July and August, September, October. We enter the dry season in Kansas City. So we think this is a real timely subject for us to really be talking about on the KC Pier side, settling. And we're starting to see those jobs come in for us. And so we're going to spend some time today talking to you as homeowners and our realtor contingency that's out there about signs of settling and some of the things from the common sense to the drastic measures that sometimes ultimately we have to take at KC Pier and how we take those measures to ultimately resolve these settling issues. So you guys ready to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Okay, so we're gonna spend a lot of time picking Brian's brain. The 18 years in the foundation business and obviously has dealt with some of the all types of settling issues from the minor to the severe. And
Absolutely.
So we'd like to pick your brain a little bit about, let's start at the kind of the 10,000 foot level. There's the very beginning signs of potentially foundation issues and what homeowners, realtors can kind of look for.
So, yeah, as you do that and you're outside in the yard, your 10,000 view is basically starting to see cracks in your soil.
Mm-hmm.
Usually your cracks start around trees because your trees are absorbing all the moisture. So you'll start seeing the cracks come off that a little bit faster than you will around anywhere else. Also, you'll start seeing it around the foundation, usually around all your bushes you have as your decor around there. That's your first sign that you're starting to get into the dry season.
Yep.
Once you start seeing that, that's where you want to start actually looking and potentially starting to water.
Yeah.
I know it's weird saying water your foundation,
Yeah.
but
Yes, it is.
your water bill being a little higher every month versus saving $10,000, $15,000 worth of piering is definitely well worth it, considering we only have to do it usually 3 or 4 months out of the year.
So let's unpack that, because you always hear, you see this about this time of year. You'll see it on the news where they actually run some spots and some cameo pieces where they're basically talking about cracks in the foundation and always watering those cracks. But technically, why do you want to water the cracks? What's the soil doing to react to that, and how is that beneficial to the foundation?
So here in the Midwest, we don't have slabs. We have basements.
Mm-hmm. So
if you miss it by a couple weeks, it's not going to hurt you very much. But usually what happens is as your soil shrinks, what happens is it shrinks from the foundation, and then it causes the heat to chase the cracks down.
Yep.
And if you neglect it long enough, the soil shrinks all the way down to the footing, potentially releasing and creating hollow underneath your foundation footing.
Mm-hmm.
And your foundation, your footing, your rebar, all that can only hold for so long.
That's right.
So that's what the cracks do. We have the benefit of having 8-foot basements that takes 3, 4, 5 weeks for a massive heat wave, 80, 90 degrees consistently, to start affecting your house.
Okay, so I'm going to back it up just a little bit because you talked about it perfectly. aside from maybe the fact that it's the clay that's receding, right? Because we talk about that a lot, especially in the watery ages that we deal with from spring through right now, is clay basically can absorb water and expand like a sponge, and then when that water isn't present, the heat is present, it begins to withdraw and contract, and when it contracts, we see that contraction in the form of cracks.
Yes.
And I love your point, because you're saying we have the benefit of an 8-foot foundation wall, which means that crack needs about 5 weeks to finally get to the point where it could potentially create a void underneath the footer. And if there's a void there in the footer because it's gotten so dry that ultimately the rebar, the concrete trying to hold up that house ultimately probably has to give, and that's where you start to see those cracks in the foundation wall begin to form.
Absolutely.
So by watering, we are reversing that effect by expanding that clay, closing those cracks, adding support to the foundation, so no cracks, no settling, healthy foundation.
Yep.
Right? That's a really, really good point. So now we let it go, we don't water, it accumulates over years, and now the cracks begin to show up and the potential of settling begins. We get the phone call. So when you ultimately go to a home, how do you assess whether there truly is active settling going on, or whether it's misdirected and fear from a homeowner's or a realtor's perspective? Because we all know this from a realtor's perspective. And us being on KC Property Guys' side from a real estate perspective, foundation issues and mold are the two biggest things that run people out of the house. But we also want to make sure that they're actually genuine fears. So if you can kind of talk us through how to assess cracks versus settling versus which are considered more serious than others.
Yeah. So every time I talk to somebody, the YouTube videos and what we're doing here is not every crack is a bad crack.
Right.
Knowing that it's there and monitoring it is very important, but not every crack is a bad crack. But when you start seeing it, usually what happens is you'll get cracks off windows and doors. You'll start having doors stick, not open, not being able to function. Or depending on how far it's settled before you've really seen it, you'll start actually feeling it in the floor. You'll start seeing slope.
It sounds like you're describing my house to me right now.
Hopefully not.
I'm on a crawl space, so I feel like that'd be a separate conversation. But
yeah,
but it can be the same. It potentially can be. And me from a real estate perspective, and you from a structural consultant's perspective, typically those first 3 or 4 steps into a house, you're like, okay, all right, I'm already starting to feel a little bit something here or there. I'm leaning one way or the other. I mean, we're probably a bit more sensitive to those things than the average.
I'm definitely more sensitive to it.
Average
it don't
bear.
matter what house I go into, that's the first thing I do because I've been doing it so long.
Yeah,
so
you can feel it.
You just know.
Does drive your friends crazy
It
then?
drives them completely crazy. So.
Yeah. All right. So reading through that. We can't just, it'd be gypsy magic, black box magic. If you're trying to talk a homeowner saying, hey man, I can feel it. It's like, no, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So what types of tools do we bring in the house? What's what's your typical assessment look like? How do we approach that from a KC Pier perspective, knowing that we're really trying to take care of the homeowner?
So when I get to a house, I ask the homeowner, what's your concerns? Well, at that point, I'll walk through, I'll see what's going on. We'll walk through everything that they have, and then I bring in a compy level, which is used a lot in the South because everything's slab on grade, but I really like it here for the first floor. How I do it is I set it at the front door, and then I take measurements around the entire house. And then with that, everything is digital. So when we do it at that time, I let the homeowner come with me and I let them see everything all the way around. So that way they understand where their house is. Not that that's how far it's down, that's where it is.
Right.
And in the basement, I use a laser level.
Laser level. Yeah. I've seen it many times.
I love the laser level personally. I can get everything. It's very easy to go around with the tape measure and physically see what it is.
Yep.
During that time, I also take the homeowner with me because it's their house.
Yep.
There's no reason to hide anything when you're doing it. You want it to be fully exposed on what's going on.
Right.
But before I do that, I also walk around and show them what I see, show them what I feel, show them everything that they probably didn't see as they were showing me what they do see.
Right.
And once you get done with that, the actual numbers confirm what's going on, but that's not initially how far your house is down. So there's a lot of people go in and they find the highest point and show you that it's down 3 inches when it's not.
Right. Right.
So what you normally...
But ultimately, that house is, the perimeter of the house is graphed out.
Correct.
Right. And you do find, the differences.
Correct.
Within that house, but not necessarily from the high point.
No.
Right.
Not at all. So as you're doing it, each crack shows you what the house is doing. It tells you what it's doing. 9 times out of 10, when you have a settlement crack, the crack points to where it's settling.
Right.
It is a crack that separates. It's usually wider when it starts, and it starts to get close as it goes to the edge.
So you could follow the crack from its thinnest point to its thickest point
Yeah.
to see where the issue is.
Yeah. Every crack tells you what the house is doing. The cracks completely tell you what your house is doing, no matter what it is.
And we talk about that in our real estate seminars that we run through the winter. We go through a crack seminar and tell people how the cracks are talking. Cracks definitely do talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Your sheetrock cracks show more settlement than a concrete crack because wood expands and bends, and your sheetrock gives more than the concrete does. So your concrete can give around 3/4 of an inch before it actually starts to physically break and show huge signs, but your sheetrock tells you within a 1/2 inch what it's doing. And you'll start seeing the stress cracks break. Usually 95% of them are over doors, windows, hallway is a big one, is down the hallway. And you usually get those. It's usually when it comes a big concern and people start noticing it is the front door, the back door, because they can't lock them anymore. So you take away that safety aspect. And surprisingly enough, it's your bathroom door. If you can't shut the bathroom when you have friends over, they're like, you know what? Something's going on.
Yeah, something's going on.
Those are the 3 main keys of what's actually happening.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. The podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your likes, shares, and support. Now, back to the show.
So windows and doors are sticking, right? You're seeing these cracks come out of door jambs, down hallways, potentially in the foundation wall itself. Those cracks do point towards issues, and so obviously we notate that as foundation guys. We come in, there's a consultation, laser levels, the tools come out, we come away with a drawing, and then from that drawing, what's the homeowner going to do with this information?
Well, at that point, we give options. The first one is the full repair plan.
Right.
We do whatever we have to correct whatever issue is going on, no matter how little or big it is. And then from there, we kind of isolate it depending on what the homeowner wants. We can go as far as lifting everything back up to as built, or stabilizing it exactly where it is so it don't get any worse and it don't create any more stress around the foundation.
Right. There are options, and then that's a lot of the consultation that we have, at least from the KC Pier's perspective, and Brian's really good at this, is talking about, okay, is this a forever house or is this a 5-year house? Is what's the future plan here, so I can better assess, right, the right resolution plan for you. And we talk about these on a weekly basis, specifically when it comes to settling, because settling, the jobs are not cheap.
No,
right?
Not at all.
And so we need to probably jump into the point of, why they're expensive. There's a big manual labor here. And there's obviously the pier. We got to jump into the pier and talk about how those are actually resolving these issues that we're assessing, right? So the homeowner then here's a plan. Here's the options based off of all the variables. And then we got, obviously the $10,000 question is, okay, there's my options. All right. So what's going to cost me and what's involved? How's it work? What's the timeline like? Are you guys going to be here for 5 months, 5 weeks, 5 days? What's it going to be? So can you walk us through that type of plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So the average foundation repair is right around 7 to 10, depending on how bad your house is. That's going to take between 2 and 3 days. Mm-hmm. We're usually never anywhere more than a week. So it's not your house is destroyed for months on end.
Right.
You also go from interior or exterior, and that is at that point, that is typically at the homeowner's discretion. Mm-hmm. The homeowner gets to choose. Obviously, with what we do, because everything is manual labor, the interior is going to be cheaper because it's less labor.
Meaning
we don't have to dig as far.
You don't have to dig as far. You're in the basement already, and you're on the inside.
Yes.
So you've already gone down 8 foot, if that makes sense, right? So you don't have to dig that 8 foot that you would be digging from the outside. So you have a choice there. And there's obviously a labor cost.
Yep.
Savings.
And it's, to us, as the actual labor, we love doing inside work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Inside work's great. Because
you open up the floor and 2 foot later, hey, man, I see a footer.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's there. And at that point, the weather don't affect us at all.
The weather doesn't
If
affect
it's raining, we don't have to postpone your job.
Right.
We can continue with the work.
Yeah, game
and
on.
All that is explained why we're in the house.
Yep.
Once we do that, if we do it from inside, we hang plastic. We do everything to make sure that we can save whatever you have down there that you don't want to move is covered and secured. Mm-hmm. We remove the dirt. We remove the concrete. At that point, it is still a construction site. So it gets a little dirty inside. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And sometimes, depending on how you have your basement, if it's unfinished, no one cares. If it's finished, that's when they're like, maybe it's a little better outside.
Right.
Have you dealt with a situation where you're going through the floor and maybe the homeowner sees that and suddenly the idea of a hole in their basement floor seems terrifying? Because to me, I know if I was looking at my basement and I was like, oh, there's a portal to the underworld right there in the bottom of my house. So
it can be that way.
Yeah.
It can be that way. You strike fears. But here's the beauty of that. Because we document a lot of our work online, we can send homeowners, to our YouTube channel at KC Pier. And if you really want to see it done, you can see it done, right? And so having that documentation, that exposure, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. So let's jump in to the pier itself. All right. So we got this hole dug. We're underneath the footing. We see it. Now, what's the purpose of the pier? How do we ultimately install that pier? Where is it going? And ultimately, how are we resolving the settling?
So when you install a pier is for one thing only, and it is preventing the house to settle any further than where it is once we're done. Mm-hmm. It's the only thing the pier does. It does nothing for waterproofing, does nothing for heaving or shifting. Your house is designed to heave. It is designed to shift to a certain aspect. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to tie anything into it to prevent it from doing what it's naturally supposed to do.
Could we define what heaving and shifting are and what the differences are between those two terms?
Yeah. So heaving is basically the easiest way to do it is there's so much soil that or water that it's expanded the soil so much that it's actually lifted your house. Typically, you won't see that around the perimeter as much as you will the center. Your center, because your slab is not tied into the foundation, it's designed to move because our soils are horrible. Once it does that, you have structural posts that are in the middle that's holding the main beam. That beam will go up and down, and that's where you'll get some of the heaving at. Your structural movement, shifting side to side, typically you will never see that. Because of the rebar and how strong the concrete is, it usually moves about a ½ inch side to side throughout the years. Mm-hmm. You won't see that, but if you try to tie it down, you will see it.
which is why you're saying our pier basically has the house resting on it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So let's continue that, because we basically are in this hole. Yeah. It's 4x3 holes. You'll see guys down in there, and then they have this. We're using hydraulics are involved.
Yep.
Right. And so why don't we walk us through how that pier is ultimately holding that house up or down or stabilized, as you spoke of.
Yeah. So at that time, he'll bring in the hydraulic machine. It's a little loud, but it's very compact and small, so we can bring it inside the house. It runs off electric, so there's no gas fumes. We'll put it underneath the foundation wall and footing. We don't have to break anything. Our pier is concentrically loaded, so we don't disturb what was supposed to be there in the first place.
Now, I think that is such a critical point that people just hear it and they're like, that just went over my head. What does concentrically loaded mean? But there are, when you really get into it and talk about different types of piers, certain piers are bracketed. So it's almost like you're holding your elbows with your arms out and you want to hold the house up on that bracket. And concentrically loaded means we're moving that bracket. Essentially, it's center point loaded, and we're moving it underneath the house itself, center loaded on that pier itself, which I think is a fantastic advancement and a really market advantage for KC Pier and our system for settlement resolution. I just think it speaks so great to our resolutions, and that's one of the reasons why we can put lifetime warranties on this stuff. And typically we set them and we forget them because it is done.
Yes. When we install our pier itself, we can't lift unless we hit load-bearing strata, because all of our pressure is on the first pier that goes in, the first segment that drives down. So if we don't get enough pressure, we can't lift. So to that extent, it's fail-proof.
And we talk about this a lot, where this pier is getting driven down with hydraulics, and you're calling it load-bearing strata, bedrock, essentially. We're looking for a big pressure change in the hydraulics, right? When we know that we can't go down any further. And so we explain this a lot to people in the house, where you guys have been or seen pictures of houses in Mississippi and Louisiana, and they're in the swamps, and they're sitting on these stilts on the swamps, and they're like, whoa, that's a little strange looking. Well, we're doing the same thing. You just can't see it. We're doing it under the ground. Yeah. Right? We're adding those stilts there, and we're driving them, the piers, quote unquote stilts, we're driving them down to bedrock, load-bearing strata, and then ultimately either stabilizing or recovering, lifting the house to the points of which we've discussed with the homeowner. Yep. Right?
The one thing I can tell you is if you do the full recovery or you stabilize, we're lifting the house at least a 1/4 inch no matter what.
Right.
And the reason being is I have to move the house to know I have enough pressure to hold the house.
That's right. Yeah, you got to have some type of feedback.
Yeah.
So you know that you've recovered it and you've hit that stabilization point.
So it doesn't matter where we put it in or how we put it in. We're getting at least a 1/4 inch lift no matter what, because I have to make sure I have enough weight to hold that particular pier.
Really good point. Right. How many feet apart are they?
That depends on the house.
Yeah.
Your normal is right at 6 foot. If you have a single story house with a basement, you're right at 6 foot.
Yep.
If it's a 2-story with a basement, technically a 3-story, we got to bring the piers in closer. And it's not because the piers can't hold. It's because the foundation can't hold how far they're apart.
Perfect.
Your concrete is only so strong. So if we continue to move them further apart with the weight load up top, typically what's going to happen is you're going to point load. So you have to bring them in closer so everything is distributed evenly down the foundation. So as we lift, we don't cause any more damage.
Excellent. Quick hitters for you, because we're going to wrap things up, but I know there's probably questions, and feel free to always go to kcpier.com. Send us your comments, questions. If you need us to take a look at the house, you can fill out that form. We'll be out in no time. Talk to Dolores. You can call the phone number, and we'll get it set up. We'll get Brian or our other Eric, our structural consultants out there. But some quick hitters that just come into mind that I definitely want to get in. Can you pier a garage?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? Can you pier a crawl space?
Absolutely.
Rock wall?
Yes.
Yes?
Yep.
See, that's a huge question we get a lot. You pier and lift a rock wall, because, we have, obviously, in Kansas City, a a load of rock wall homes. Prairie
There's a
Village,
ton of stone.
Leawood.
There's a ton of stone, and you can't lift,
Yep.
but you can stop it.
You can stop it. You can stabilize.
Yep.
Yep. Decks begin to fall and pull away from the house. Can you actually throw piers under decks?
You can, depending on how heavy the deck is, but we have other options to stop that as well.
Perfect. Chimneys.
Yep.
Absolutely. Chimneys fall and away from the house, lean away from the house. You can actually get some recovery in that lean.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wing walls.
Yep.
Yeah. So it really, there's multiple functions for piering. We just need to understand the issue that you may have. And you can always send in pictures too. We got the KC Pier app. You can download the app on Google Play or iTunes and take, it's a great app because you can just take pictures. It goes directly to Brian or Eric, and they within 24 hours will reply to you with like, yep, I think I need to get out there and see it. Or there's like, this is what's going on, and don't worry about it. Don't sweat it, water it, and be done with it. You'll get a quick assessment. So that's a neat way to kind of communicate and not necessarily wait the 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on how backlogged we are to see a structural consultant. Anything else you want to add?
At the moment, no. I think we went over mostly everything we needed at the moment.
It's great timing, and I really appreciate all the info and coming in and taking time out from the guys and carving this out, because for you homeowners and realtors out there that are dealing with cracks, you can downgrade the fear with a really good, honest opinion of what's going on. We are fortunate enough to be so busy that we don't have to create work. We can give very good, honest, straightforward opinions with options based off budget, how long you're going to be in the house, whether it's a real estate transaction or not. We can build resolutions to bring you to the closing table and customize solutions for people. And that's what I think we do really, really well here. So thanks for coming in.
Not a problem.
John, you got the first podcast under the belt, put the notch on there. That was awesome. So, and welcome aboard, of course.
Thank you.
And so John's going to be producing this podcast, and he's going to add some pictures here for, the final product, which we literally look forward to it. But we're going to wrap this up. This is our latest edition for the Kansas City Real Estate and Industry Leaders Show. I want to thank Brian and John for tagging along, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Kansas City Real Estate Industry Leaders Show. Please support all things local to Kansas City. And hey, be sure to subscribe and share our podcast on Facebook and LinkedIn. This has been a KC Property Guys production. KCPropertyGuys.com.